we are back on the dyno for the second time with Mark's Sapphire Blue Z32. First time we had it on, we had done quite a few upgrades and maintenance on it, and it had some sort of HKS turbos on there. It looks like they were 2530s, but made 2 passes and the thing was a complete James Bond smoke show. This thing just filled the entire shop with smoke. Wasn't too stressed out aside of it being just turbos, because we had done a compression and leak down test on the motor. We knew everything was good, and the first pass or two was just 10 pounds of boost. So those turbos had the wastegates, pretty loose, and sure enough, we pulled the exhaust off, pulled the inlet piping and the charge piping hoses off of it, and just coated with oil, tons of oil inside the track. The intake manifold was just the inside, right past the throttle bodies were just full of oil. So we pulled the turbos off. At that point, why not? Let's upgrade the exhaust manifolds. So changed the exhaust manifolds over, and we did a set of the JWT Sport 700s, Gen 2 GTXs, Garrett 2860s, Gen 2 GTX versions. Did the manifolds, did a set of the low profile motor mounts to go along with our inlet piping. So you'll notice that looking at it, for those that can tell, still has stock intercooler charge pipes. It even still has, believe it or not, the factory rubber hoses. They've survived all these years. I'm sure they've probably been replaced at least once. We've put a proper dual pop. So when this thing came to us, it had a funky sized K&N filter on one side and your kind of normalish JWT pop charger on there, and it still had the low speed drivability stuff. So we added the KLDA transmogrifier / translator onto this bad boy. Did a bunch of maintenance like I had mentioned before, timing belt, all that good stuff, and changed some of the exhaust bits, of course. Thankfully, we were able to reuse our DPs or downpipes with these turbos, and this is running our FedCat setup as well. Flex fuel had already been done. That was all set up, good to go. And yeah, I mean, first time out, total smoke show. We stopped, made 10 pounds of boost, was only like 243 wheel horsepower, but here we are. Inlet pipes, our turbo upgrade, manifolds, and this thing woke up. So because of course we're still limited with our stock charge pipes, it does have the OG old school Trust Greddy intercoolers, which are still pretty small, better than stock. We're of course limited. It's a stock engine still on what we can do on 91 octane, but because we have E85, you can crank it up. So we're limited 15 pounds of boost on 91. We did about 412 wheel, doing of course the more breather stuff, the intercoolers and our intercooler piping would probably get this thing up to about 440, 450 wheel. So another 40, 50 wheel just by doing our intercoolers and intercooler piping, and you get a little bit more on 91. But beauty of V85, it's such a good fuel. We cranked this bad boy up. Of course, leaving the boost alone, we made about 480 wheel just by throwing the fuel in and making our changes with fueling and timing. Of course, we cranked it up and we made as much as 616 wheel with this bad boy. We're gonna leave it probably more tame, mid 550s. We're super limited on the tire setup that it has right now anyway, but let's take a look at the graph. We had a little bit of an anomaly on our high boost pass. Shows that it made 30. Didn't, of course, a little fluke, but yeah, we pulled 616 wheel and 616 foot-pounds of torque. That's how you know you have a super well-matched turbo for your engine. You have your horsepower and torque are just right there. So remember, the smaller the turbo, if it's really, really small, your torque is higher than your horsepower. And if you have a really super big turbo or turbos, you're gonna have a lot more horsepower than you are your torque. So one of my favorite turbos for these engines. And of course, on a built motor, these things can make 800 plus, on these exact same turbos. You're gonna need definitely improvements with the bottom end, just besides rods and pistons if you want to do that, but this setup will do it. So 91, 412, and 391 foot-pounds of torque. So happy to say, smoke is all gone. Now that we're done with this on the dyno, we're gonna pull the balance tube off, pull the charge hoses off, and we're gonna clean everything up again just to make sure we get all that oil cleaned up, mopped up, so that we're not diluting and shoving a bunch more into that engine. So happy to say we've got another one done. All right, guys, here's our chart. You can see our peak boost was 25 pounds of boost on the 616. So ignore that value there. and just does a really, really good job for a stock engine with stock charge pipes and small intercoolers. Does a really good job of holding our power. Like I said, this engine is entirely bone stock, cams, everything, bottom end. So these VGs really are impressive considering how old these things are, from the 90s now. These, they're fantastic. So like I said, when we were, doing these, when I was talking about my car, our go-to was always just a brand new Nissan short block. Back then we weren't making quite as much power, 400 to 500 wheel horsepower car back in the early 2000s was a lot of power, and those stock blocks handled it back then and they can handle it now. So just harder to find, good stock engines that haven't been abused, and, unfortunately Nissan doesn't make a factory short block anymore that you can buy. So, your only chance really is trying your luck at a used engine, but they're so old, I wouldn't even risk it, is building it. So, make sure you find a competent machine shop and builder when you are building your VG30.